Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. You can't make this stuff up. A lot of stuff in the news, which makes our job that much more easier, and I'm sure our listeners that much more entertained. Two entertainment topics. Dave Chappelle, a comedian that I truly love, that has brass you-know-what. I saw him on a special. In fact, I was listening to Breitbart Radio, and they were talking about a special he did for Netflix that basically hardly politically correct and challenging the whole LBGQ XL7 agenda. In fact, and the only reason I say that because I can't keep track of all the letters. And he was so funny because in his monologue, he was talking about the fact that you can say the N-word nowadays. You can say derogatory things about Jews, but God forbid the LBGQ 7XL7, you could be thrown out on your ass. And he had the balls to go and do it again, and there might be a mass walkout at Netflix.
Yeah. Honestly, I think anybody who's really complaining about this special didn't watch it. Aside from the fact that Dave Chappelle was hysterical, and I have not always been a big fan of his. Not that I've ever found him offensive, I just didn't always find him funny. This particular special, not only was it funny, it was intelligent and it was heartwarming. And one of the things that keeps getting pushed aside is the fact that he spends a good part of this special talking about a transgender comedian who was his friend. And because she defended him, the transgender community hounded her to the point that she committed suicide. This is what the transgender community is about. If you don't agree with them, they will torture you.
It's bigger than that. I agree with you, Dr. Lopkin, without any question, but it's more of the woke liberal community. You go against them in today's world, you are screwed, dude. You can lose your job, you can lose your vocation, you can lose a lot, your reputation. And by the way, one thing you mentioned that I thought was dead on was that you said something that people that protest, and I didn't see this latest one, I saw the previous one, which I've alluded to, but you said the fact that if, people that are protesting never really saw it. Is that really a surprise to any of us? No, it's all knee-jerk reactions. Half of them
never. It really isn't. In this latest special, he talks about the fact that all of this started from an article in a magazine where the reporter never spoke to him. They just made stuff up. The transgender community and the woke community fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And they've been hounding him ever since. Well, guess what? We live in America, and we have something called the First Amendment. And the First Amendment means people can say things you don't like.
Okay, you don't think that's in jeopardy? I do. I think if you're on the right, listen, I'm not a big fan of Sean Hannity. I'm not endorsing him. Tucker Carlson, I do like. They're monitored 24/7. They say one little thing that might not be accurate, a little bit on the gray area. They're called to task. Look at Fox. It has much higher ratings than CNN. Do you know what kind of sponsors they have? My Pillow and something to cure baldness with lasers. I mean, it's not exactly General Motors. Why do you think that's the case? Because General Motors, big companies, are scared shitless to go on Fox. That's how it is, because of cancel culture.
Yeah, cancel culture has gotten out of control. However, I think there are signs that it's starting to turn around, because they've tried to cancel Dave Chappelle, and he fought back and he's winning. They tried to cancel Joe Rogan, and he fought back and he's winning. So as early as, I would say, a year ago, if you tried to fight back against cancel culture, you had no shot. Now we're seeing victories against them. So I think things are starting to turn around, and I hope
Can I
they
interject
continue.
a theory on that? Because I like what you're saying. My theory is this, that it's moved into mainstream America, meaning they've awoken and they've said, okay, this is way out of control. Like, gay rights fine. And now we're into, XL. I don't even know what half of this stuff means. It's gone way over the top. Not everyone, most people in America are accepting of other people, but it's like the tail wagging the dogs. It's like a bridge too far, and people say, okay, this is enough.
Exactly. And I think part of what's going on is the fact that the liberals went too far. And you've got people like Jon Stewart, like Bill Maher, who are diehard liberals going, no, we got to slam the brakes on. This is wrong.
Well, even Jerry Seinfeld, who's not exactly, a right winger, he's like, you can't even do a college campus. You could really not do a year ago, you could not do a major university. It would be the most vanilla comedy routine ever. Like my dog sat, and probably then you'd get PETA protesting you. You can't say a word.
All right.
So anyway, that's just how it is. But speaking of, I guess, political correctness and being, I think, a little bit of the Hollywood elite being ashamed of American values. It wasn't the case when Superman first came out at the beginning of, or right before World War II. Instead of the American way, I believe it was Disney has changed that to a better way.
No, it's Warner Brothers
I'm sorry.
Truth, Justice, and a Better Tomorrow.
Oh, I thought it was a better way. Okay.
A Better Tomorrow. This is not the first time that DC and Warner Brothers have done this. When they tried to revitalize the Superman movie franchise with Superman Returns, there was a scene where Perry White is questioning, and he says, does Superman still stand for truth, justice, and all that stuff? They would not say the American way because they did not want to offend China. And this is going back a number of years. Now, Warner Brothers has gone completely off the reservation, because in the past several weeks, they have announced several long-time characters that have been around for at least 30 years or more are now suddenly bisexual.
Of course.
They made Superman's son came out as bisexual. Now they're getting rid of the American way. Here's the thing. This is going to bite them in the ass.
Oh, no. It's exactly what we talked about, Dr. Lopkin, with the NFL. It's these elitists. They don't understand who they're marketing. It's middle America. It's the average Joe and Jane. And they don't want to hear this crap. They want to be entertained, and they want to suspend reality for a little while for truth, justice, and guess what? The American way. And it's all a fantasy anyway. It's escapism. But no, you got to interject woke culture.
And again, this is not the first time this has happened in this industry, and we've seen it fail before. Marvel Comics had a problem a couple of years ago. They were being hammered about not having enough racial diversity in their characters. So they created new characters with more racial diversity. Guess what? Their circulation continued to plummet. DC, with their action figures a number of years ago, were attacked because they weren't putting out enough female action figures. What did they do? They came out with a whole line of figures tied into the Wonder Woman movie. They came out with an entire line of toys called DC Superhero Girls. What happened? When Toys R Us went out of business, they had aisles and aisles of these things left over because nobody wanted to buy them. The problem is they're kowtowing to an audience that doesn't buy action figures and doesn't buy comic books.
And they don't even understand people because they're so tied to this intellectualism, which isn't really true, which they think is intellectualism, and wokeism. A girl is happy to buy a Superman hero. It's not about wokeness. It's about enjoying something. Can we just enjoy something without being politically correct? Now, speaking of offending China wasn't really all that concerned about offending us when they just launched a hypersonic missile test. How come they weren't,
No,
concerned about
yeah,
offending us? Gee.
they now have a missile that is capable of carrying a nuclear payload and hitting California. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. Of course, quite frankly, I don't want to see China get ahead of us in the arms wars. I want them kept in check. But quite frankly, at this point, I can't say I'd be all that sorry to lose California.
Oh no, Gavin Newsom, that's a national treasure. By the way, he just banned lawnmowers. Okay, you have
Yeah.
economic problems. More people are leaving California than the Exodus of 3,000 years ago in the Bible, right? And what is he doing? Worrying about banning. I mean, the guy is dumber than rocks. He's a great looking guy. Looks like something out of Central Casting,
And
but he's worried about banning leaf
yeah,
blowers
it's
and
absolutely
lawnmowers.
ridiculous what's
A
going on
moron,
in
an
California.
absolute moron.
And I don't know how many of our listeners are even aware of this, but I'm sure they've all been noticing the supply line crisis and empty shelves at the supermarkets. California is largely responsible for this. As much as the Biden administration tries to say, oh, it's because people want to buy so much. No, the truth of the matter is most truck drivers are independent owners. Essentially, they're part of the gig economy. And California has banned those truck drivers from working in California. If you are not working for an employer rather than yourself as like an Uber driver or a Lyft driver, you can't pick up cargo at California ports. Guess what? That's created our supply line problem.
Oh, okay, I agree with that 100%. But it goes. You don't want to hammer a point we've already gone over in numerous episodes. But isn't it all elitism? Gavin Newsom, a gentleman, a person that's never worked a day in his life, probably went to a really prestigious school, even though he probably got 1,000 on his SATs. He has no connection with the real world, and that's why we are where we are. And speaking of no connection, we have Pete Bodagez, someone that, again, really have accomplished nothing in his life. South Bend, Indiana. I've been to South Bend, Indiana, and the place is a hellhole, okay?
Now,
and
what is he? I want to take a moment to apologize to our listeners. Because back during the 2020 presidential election, I was actually pushing Pete Buttigieg for the Democratic nominee. I was saying he was one of the people in this lineup that could have been better for us. And
I'm taking away your doctorate degree.
Yes. Oh my God. Has he proven me
degree.
wrong? And I apologize to our listeners for my positive comments about him.
The guy is a complete, going on, the whole thing is so crazy. If it was a movie like 10 years ago, you'd walk out, not in disgust because you say this movie is just crazy, it's stupid. He takes a 2-month maternity leave. You can't even, it's beyond reproach. Meanwhile, the supply chain is in meltdown.
Right. And as Secretary of Transportation, this is his responsibility. He is supposed to be fixing this, and instead he's on a 2-month paternity leave. You know what? When my son was born, I took a couple of days off and got back to work.
And women do the same thing who've actually had to endure childbirth. His partner was a guy. Okay, it's almost comical. And the other thing is, he did, and I heard this. This is not my original thinking. That it was more important to him to make a point about gay maternity leave than it was to manage the meltdown in the supply chain. I think that was an accurate assessment, Dr. Lopkin.
That is absolutely accurate, and it is absolutely ridiculous because you know what? He could have come back to work even part-time just to deal with this crisis and made the point how important both were. Instead, he made a artificial choice because he decided his lifestyle was more important and he left the rest of the country out to dry.
Can I interject a really just a monumental point? Has he ever heard of a cell phone? Like,
Right.
I mean, you can
He
be
could have done this from his
maternity leave.
living room, a Zoom call, a cell phone.
Yeah,
He
I
did
mean,
not
I
have
know
to
these things
leave
are
his house.
abstract thoughts, but it was all he did it intentionally, and that's a fact. So we have Colin Powell, who is deceased. I have no mixed feelings about his death. I think it's horrible. I think he lived an honorable life. Politically, I'm really not. I'm kind of a little bit, on the fence. And I also have to say, it goes back 20 years ago when he gave that speech to the UN about weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, but
I
I'm
knew, and I'm not Secretary of State at that particular.
I'm gonna
Go ahead.
stop you on that, because I actually have a lot of respect for him, not for that talk, but for how he dealt with that talk afterwards, because he was given the intelligence by not just our intelligence community, but by the communities of several European countries, and they all agreed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and it was his job to go to the UN and explain this. Afterwards, when he found out he was wrong, he was deeply apologetic and embarrassed, and he said, "You know what? This was the information I had, but it was my fault that this went through," and he took responsibility, which none of our generals today do.
Okay, I agree with that, but I would have to say, listening to the transcript that he related to the UN, most people, let's just say, it was a little suspicious. We'll just move on. Again, he led an honorable life. Politically, I'm not so sure. I wasn't totally in lockstep with him. Supported Hillary and other kind of decisions, but I think he should have maybe done a little more research on that speech. We have, again, do as I say, not as I do. Cori Bush, a darling of the liberal intelligentsia, one of the big proponents of defund the police. Oh, surprise, surprise, Dr. Lopkin. She just spent, oh my God, can you believe $130,000 plus on her own security? Yeah, I don't think we needed.
Because
we didn't need police.
Because
we don't
nobody else needs security, unless the only people that need security are the ones that can afford private security. This is typical liberal bullshit. And you're starting to see Austin, Texas was one of the communities that defunded the police, and their city council is now scrambling to put the funding back. New York City defunded the police. The presumptive mayor, because they're not even giving the Republican a fighting chance in next month's election, but the presumptive mayor has said, no, we are refunding the police. You are starting to see everybody except the most radical liberals go, this was a really bad idea.
Well, let's talk about bad ideas. I have bad ideas too, like, leaving, the burner on all day or whatever, not doing this. I mean, you didn't know they're the geniuses. They're the ones who love science and facts, and we're, the Republicans are knuckle drag. What kind of a moron would think defunding the police, instead of sending police to a incident, you send a psychiatrist and a family counselor? Boy, that just makes me quake in my boots, doesn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, and of course they're all the rising crime rate is due to COVID. No, it's not due to COVID. It's due to defunding the police. The police
and sending
serve
a signal
purpose,
out more than. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And more than just defunding the police, we have in a lot of these same areas left-wing wacko district attorneys who are refusing to prosecute even when the police catch the criminals.
100%. I think, and I'm sorry I was getting interjected, and you're 100% correct that it's more than just, it's a whole environment that you're setting up in great cities, previously great cities like Portland and Seattle. It's just sad. Moving on, we talked about this, and you actually articulated this, more than a month ago. We're looking at the 2022 midterms. There's even more liberal-leaning statisticians and political experts are saying that the Democrats are in for a big, beyond the traditional dive, a huge dive. In fact, 13 prominent Democratic congressmen have opted out already that are in vulnerable districts, either leaving politics or going for other offices. And I think it completely dovetails into Biden's. I mean, again, you get older, you think you've seen it all. I really do. I think I've seen it all in politics. But you have someone that's been in office for less than a year, and he's at 36% approval rating and 56% disapproval rating. The math doesn't quite add up, but you get the gist. How does that happen, Dr. Lott? You're the doctor, even though you went for Mayor Pete. You're the doctor. How does it happen in less than a year? You could have Bozo the Clown, and he'd be probably at 45%.
You know, the big problem is that the Democrats decided that Joe Biden was going to be their candidate. And they decided this before the primaries were over. So, of course, they pushed their agenda. They pushed him to put a centrist, face on him, because they knew if they pulled this left-wing crap in the primaries, if Bernie Sanders or one of the left-wing Elizabeth Warren had actually won, we would have another 4 years of Trump. So they put this false face on Biden, saying, oh, we're going to be a centrist party, and then they pulled the plug and they went full bore to the left. And here's the thing. If you voted for Trump, you certainly didn't vote for this. If you were a moderate and you voted for Biden, you didn't vote for this. So they pulled this bullshit on their own party, and now you've got moderate Democrats going, no, this is not what we voted for. And for some reason, the Democrats think that the 2020 election was a mandate. They have a 50-50 Senate and a 3-vote advantage in the House. Not only is this not a mandate, what this is a mandate for is bipartisanship. And Biden kept saying, we're going to bring the country together. We're going to bring the country together. And since day one, he's done nothing but tear the country apart.
No question about it. I don't think he's capable. I don't even think it's him. I don't even know he has the ability to even understand things. And I'm not saying that for a fact. I really mean that. So I don't even know if he's really at the helm. It's not the Joe Biden of 20 years ago. Not that that was any Mensa candidate, but this one's a depleted moron. He was a moron 20 years ago. Now you have a depleted moron. Not a good prescription for success. And speaking of lack of success, we have Bidenflation. We have shortages. This is not going to go well for 2022. There's no way.
I mean, just a quick checklist of the problems that Biden has gotten into is inflation, both food, gas, and other items. Everything's going up at a rate unseen in over a decade. We have Afghanistan, and today the kinder, gentler Taliban made it clear that they are going to be paying the families of suicide bombers in money and land. We have the southern border, which now we see they're moving migrants around the country in the dead of night so that nobody sees the flights.
Against America's will. Places like New York, our own Hartford, Connecticut. No one signed up for this crap. I think it was an election against Donald Trump for very good reasons. Let's be honest. Maybe not policy, but there was Trump fatigue. The guy never knew how to shut up, and he couldn't keep it together. So he got his ass thrown out, okay? And it was nothing to do with a woke liberal agenda. They completely misunderstood that. So, again, we look at one last topic of interest, and that's the Virginia race. And McAuliffe, who's the Democrat, actually came out and said that Biden, the boy genius, is an actual drag on his chances, or he said headwind. It's a toss-up. I believe there's a very, very, very good chance that that the Republican challenger is going to win. And my big question to you is, what does that say about 2022? Kind of a rhetorical question. That's going to send a shot across the bow, isn't it?
It depends. If McAuliffe wins, the election is actually meaningless, because Virginia, they keep saying it's a purple state, it's a purple state. No,
it's not. It's a blue state.
As a state, a Republican has not won statewide election in Virginia for 13 years. So if he ends up winning, and they're throwing more money at this right now, you have Barack Obama, Jill Biden, and Kamala Harris all in Virginia campaigning for him. So
I don't know if Kamala does any good. But
yeah,
anyway,
I know, but the Democrats are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at that. So if he wins, it doesn't actually mean anything.
Well, I agree with. Yeah, if the Republican wins, it's huge.
Right, if the Republican wins, and right now, the McAuliffe has a 3-point advantage, which is within the margin of error. So this race is actually too close to call, and it's been getting closer and closer.
So the question is, if the Republican challenger wins, what are the repercussions? What happens on Tuesday night, 2 weeks from now?
One of the big repercussions is you're going to see a backlash against critical race theory around the country, because that has turned out to be the big issue in that race, especially when McAuliffe, during the debate, said parents don't have any right to determine what their kids are taught.
That's a really brilliant statement. That's a brilliant
statement. This energized parents to come out against him.
Who would say that? What kind of a dumbass? I mean, I don't care about critical race theory. That goes back to 100 years ago. Parental involvement in the education system was part of what made it work. What are you going to remove parents from the process?
If McAuliffe loses this, aside from critical race theory getting a massive smackdown, this is going to terrify the Democrats. We are already seeing predictions that we may see a flip in the House similar to Obama's midterm elections, where the Democrats lost 66 seats. They're already saying this is possible. If the Republicans win Virginia, this goes from possible to likely.
To probable and probably worse. Well, great show. Tell our listeners all the opportunities they have to access the Carnivore Bites.
Yeah, you can find us every week at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website. You can also catch us on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lopkin. Great show, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next week.